Hello and welcome everybody, this is Roland Hartmann from GraphicInMotion.com and I'm back with another exciting tutorial for Superluminal.tv. In this tutorial we are going to create this cool 3D abstract landscape that you can see here, and we will of course use Stardust and After Effects. So we will create some 3D particles, we will use some images to control color and offset, and then we will animate this and try to create a really cool look. It's actually a really easy technique and very versatile for different kind of projects, and I hope that you like it. So let's jump right into After Effects. In After Effects, first of all, let's create a new composition, and I will use a preset, and I will use this HDTV25 preset, and this will be my main composition. I will create another composition, and this will be my image composition. So this will be, let's say, 1000 by 1000 for the sake of this tutorial. And inside this composition, I will put my image that I will use to control different aspects of our animation. So to do that, let's import an image, and I will just use this image here that I got from the internet. And if I take a look at it, you see that it is this kind of a painting, digital painting with really nice colors and very organic shapes. And this really creates a very nice look using this technique that I'm going to show you. So let's drag this image into my composition, and I will scale it up a little bit so that it fills my screen like this. Looks pretty cool. Okay, perfect. Inside my main composition, let's create a new solid, and I will call this Stardust, and I will apply the Stardust effect to this solid. Okay. And now let's do some changes here. So first of all, we have to set up our emitter. And for this look, we need a grid emitter. To change the type to grid, we need to emit only once. We do not need any speed on our particles, so turn this down to 0. And now we can change the size. In my case, I want the size of my grid to be exactly the same as the dimensions of my image. And this is 1000 on X. I will set it to 1 on Y and 1000 on Z. So it is a flat grid here, right in the middle of my scene. Now let's change the grid properties, and let's change the distribution and number of particles. So I do not want particles on Y, so I can set this to 1. And let's see, maybe we start with 250 times 250 particles. So 250 on X, 250 on Z. And if we take a look now, let me quickly add a new light, because if I add a new light, then I can change, and I will use a parallel light. That's okay. Then I can change to my custom view here, and you see what we have got here. And you see that I have just this plane made out of particles. Now inside my particles, let me change these, and I want to actually increase the duration, the lifespan, to 10 seconds, because my composition is 10 seconds long. And I also want to use a model here. By default, it will use small cubes. And you see that this looks quite good, but let me quickly adjust the size here of my particles. So I will turn these down to 5, and you see they're still intersecting. Now let's turn this down to 4, even smaller, 2. And now you see we get this grid. So now they're not intersecting anymore. So I have to increase it back to 3. And yeah, maybe I will just leave it on 3 for now. Now I do not want to use these standard particles. I want to create a primitive here, and therefore I use my model node. And let's just link this to our particle node. And inside my model node, I can now specify my source. And as I said, I want to use a primitive, and I want to use a cube primitive. I want it to have only one segment on X, Y, and Z, because actually we do not need so many segments here. And I want them to be, let's see, maybe 20 on Y, and we will immediately see what this does. Looks good, maybe even a bit more. So let's add 50 for now. Yeah, that's better. And I also want to change to the 4 views for a moment, because I just want to see how much space is in between these cubes, and actually there is too much. So I will go to my particles. And another thing that I want to do quickly is to improve my lighting a little bit, and therefore I will just use a new null object, turn this into a 3D layer, and let's say that this is my light null. I always like to pick whip the point of interest of these parallel lights to the middle of my scene, because this makes, especially in these setups, makes lighting way easier. So let's just alt click this stopwatch and then pick whip the point of interest to the position of our light null. And by doing this, now you can freely move around the light and without losing its direction. It will always point into the middle of your scene, and this is exactly what I want. So now I will just move this light over here, and I will increase the fall of distance. Is actually already 2500. If you create a light, it may be 500. This may be not enough, so increase this to 2500 or even 3000, depending on the size of your grid and your scene. But this looks better. And now let's take a look here, and let's go back to our particles, and I will just turn down or turn up the size from 3 to 4, and yeah, I will stay with 4 for the moment, and we will see what's happening when I start to displace this a little bit. So far so good. Now let's introduce some color here, and to introduce some color we will use a field node, and I will link it directly to my particles. Don't link it to the model because this will not work, so link it to the particle node. And now change this field type from sphere to maps, because actually we want to use a map. And to use a map, I will need my map inside my scene, and I did not add it yet. So let's take our image composition and drag it into our scene and make it invisible. In Stardust now, inside the field node, we will specify that the map will be not a graph, but it will be a layer. And we have to specify our layer right here, so it should be our image layer. The sampling is okay, the quality is fine. Now we have to specify which parameters the field will apply, and actually we want to affect the color. We want to project this color along our X and Z axis, because this is actually the orientation of this cube plane here. So let's choose X and Z. And you see immediately that we get something. And this is, yeah, an image or a representation of the color of our image distributed on all of these small particles that I've got in my scene. Now you see that it has kind of a dull look, and this is because we have no material applied to our model. If I apply or add a material node here and link this material node now, you will see immediately that this will change, and now we have a nice distribution of color right here. Okay, so far so good. So this looks amazing actually. Now let's zoom in a little bit here. I'm still in my custom view, so I will just use my camera tool to zoom in or dolly in to get a little bit closer to my scene here and to get a bit better overview what's happening here. Now I want to do some offsetting, and to do offsetting, let me quickly rename this field here, and actually let me call this the color field, because this is the field that controls the color of our particles. And I just duplicate this field because it is already referring to my layer, to my image layer. And I will just change the name here now to position field, because this will control my position. And I do not have to change a lot here. I only have to go to the map settings and change this here from effect color to effect position. Now we also want to project this along the X and the Z axis to our plane here, but we do not want to apply it to the X axis, because now you see that the offset, it is offsetting the particles on the X axis, but I want to offset them on Y. So change this to Y, and you see immediately what we have got. The problem is by default now it is somehow hiding my highlight areas, so they are just pushed downwards, and I want these to be pushed upwards. But this is a really easy fix. You have this amount here, and if you turn this amount into a negative 100, you can just invert that, and you see what's happening now. Now all my highlight areas, so the areas that are brighter, the particles that are brighter, are pushed upwards, and this is exactly what I want. So this already looks really cool. Now you can change the height of this offset by either changing the amount, so you can turn this down to -35, and you see now we have a very small offset. But there's a better way to do it, so let's just leave this at -100. There is this position value in the Effect Properties tab, and if you change this down to 25, then you see that, yeah, it has the same effect, and you can also increase this and increase the height of your offset. In my case, I will leave it at 100 for now. Okay, so this already looks quite cool. But to increase this look even further, so let's dolly in a little bit further so that we can really see what's going on here and that we can see some of these particles directly. Now I want to add a little bit of beveling, because this will just add to the realism of this look. So let's go to our model properties again, so our model node. And within our model node, let's now change these bevels here. So I definitely do not want 6 bevel segments. This is a little bit too much. So let's reduce this to 2, and let's increase the bevel size to a very small amount. Probably 0.1 is enough. And if you take a look now, we have this really small bevel. So if I put this to a higher value like 1, this will not work because my cubes are so small that now we get this really strange looking, yeah, I don't know, domes or whatever it is. So also interesting, but definitely not what I want. So I will just increase this back, or maybe 0.2. Let's see. Yeah, 0.2 still works, but in my opinion, 0.1 is way better in this case. And you see now we have this slightly beveling here, and it looks really cool. Another hint that I want to give you how you can control the offset of these particles is by blurring your image. I will dolly out a little bit to take a look, or a better overview over all of these areas. And you see that we have some of these are really high, and yeah, it looks cool. But if you want it to be a little bit more even, you can achieve this by changing the image. So let's go to our image composition and let's apply a blur to our image. And in my case, I will just use a fast blur, or fast box blur this is. And let's take a look here. I do not need high values here. So if I set it to 1, this will have already a very, very, very big impact on my distribution. So you see that now it really smoothed it out quite a bit. And actually this is too much for my taste. So I will go back here and change this back down to something like 0.3. And let's see what this does. This will bring back a little bit of detail here. Yeah, like that. And I think this looks quite good and is a very good offset for the start. So now you see, this is a very simple technique that you can apply to each image. And if you now exchange this image here, just take another image, then the offset will be different, then the color will be different. So this is kind of a template offset and a procedural system actually. So now we want to improve the look of our 3D landscape. And to do this, first of all, I want to introduce a few more lights to my scene. So let me go to my active camera, or let me go actually to my 4 views, and instead of active I will stay in my custom view. Yeah, right. And now I will just play a little bit with my lighting here. So this is my first light, and this will actually be my fill light. So I will do a classic 3-point lighting now. And I duplicate this, call it key light. And you shift this over here on X, just to this corner here. Now I duplicate this again, call it backlight. And move this back right here, maybe even a little bit more into the middle here, like so. Now let's see how the height of these lights is looking. I will bring this down a little bit. And I will also bring down the fill light a little bit, and also bring down this one maybe a little bit. Something like that. That doesn't look too bad. And now we can change the colors a little bit and play with the intensity. So let's turn down the intensity of our fill light, press AA and reduce this to maybe 60. And I want this to be white, so this is okay. Now let's go to our key light and let's introduce some color here. And maybe we will take something like an orange color to make this look way more interesting. You see that this is tinting it a little bit and it looks really cool. And let's go to our backlight and let's make this really bluish, so kind of more intense blue, and maybe even increase the intensity of this to 125. Doesn't look too bad. Let's see. Maybe I want to set this even higher so that we get this really nice reflections here on top of my particles. And I think that this looks really cool now, so I like this look a lot. Okay, let's go back to my main view, my one view, and now we will add a little bit of shadows, and this will increase the look quite dramatically if we add shadows. But before we do that, let's think about which light should actually cast shadows, and I do not want all of these lights to cast shadows because this will be way too much. So let's say we want to cast shadows only from our fill light. So I will turn off cast shadows on my key light and also on my backlight. Now with my Stardust layer selected, I will go to the render settings, and there you have this option for shadows, and you can turn this on now, and you will immediately see that this increases the realism of this setup quite a bit. And if you add ambient occlusion to that, so let's turn this on, and this will even have a more dramatic impact on the look of this scene. I think that the ambient occlusion is a little bit too harsh, so let's turn this down. So let's turn down the radius to 25, because it is kind of a macro scene, maybe even further, maybe turn it down to 10. Let's see what this does. I think that this looks even better, and maybe also reduce the intensity to something like 60. And if we turn it on and off, now you see it still has a nice effect, but now it looks way more natural and way more nice. So you see we have a really absolutely amazing look here. So now let's take a look how we can add some motion to this, because right now it's just a static image and these particles are not moving, and I want these to have a slight movement. Therefore I will use a turbulence node. So let's add a turbulence node and let's link it to the position field. Now by default, if I now change the position offset value to maybe, let's say 100, you will see what this does. This will break our nice landscape completely. And this is, of course, first of all, because I forgot to limit this movement on one axis. So let me quickly change that from the turbulence type from normal to axis and the axis to Y. So this will bring back our grid, but it still messes up our nice offset. So first of all, let's increase the noise scale here to something like 300. This looks better. Now we are back to our smooth landscape. And maybe let's reduce this position offset 75, so it's not that harsh. And by default, this is also not moving, so it's still just sitting there. And if we add a little bit of fractal speed, so let's say we add a fractal speed of 5, then you will see now it starts moving. And if I create a quick round preview now, you will see how this looks like. And I can take a look whether I like this setup as it is or not in terms of speed. So let me take a look, and I think, yeah, it looks really cool. I like the speed, I like the value. Yeah, I think this is good. Okay, so far so good. Now it's time to create a nice camera angle, and then we will just put on a few more effects to create a finished and polished look. So let's go out of our custom view to our active camera. Let's create a new camera for this scene. And in this case, I will use a 20mm wide angle. Well, let's use a 50mm, so really a wide angle camera. Okay, now for this camera, I will use or create a orbit null. So create orbit null, colorize these as always to yellow. Now, actually what I want here is I want this null to be more or less near the surface of my landscape, so I could now change the position of my null, but I somehow do not want this. I want to change the position of my landscape, and to do that I just add a transform node, and I do not have to link it. I just have to put it in here, so it will have an effect on everything in this Stardust setup. And now I can change the position of on the y-axis right here. So bring this up. Actually, increasing the value will bring it down. So I have to increase the value to maybe something like 120. Doesn't look too bad. Okay, now let's select our camera orbit null and let's increase the value on x a little bit. Decrease actually, go into the negative values here. So maybe something like -25. Like so. Now let's bring in my camera close to this landscape, really close. So let's see how much we need here. Maybe something like that. -250, that looks pretty cool. Can increase this a bit, like so. Looks really good. I like it. Okay. Now let's add a background here. So I will just create a new solid and call this BG and put it right down below my Stardust layer. And I will add a gradient ramp. Now it somehow looks like a green screen, but I want to add some colors here. And I will use maybe one of these colors. I will feature some colors from my nice landscape here. So let's see what we can do here to get something nice going. Maybe something like that, or go into the oranges even, like so. Let's take a look. Doesn't look too bad. I will just increase this brightness a little bit here. Give it a bit of an angle. Not so much. Okay. But actually I will shift it over right here because the light is more coming from this direction. Okay, doesn't look too bad. And now we will add a little bit of depth of field, and this is also important. So let's go to our camera settings, press AA, and let's turn on depth of field. By default now my focus distance is way too high, so I have to decrease this quite a bit, probably to something like 150, and you already see that now my focus distance is right, or the focus is right here, and I want it to be on these bright blocks here, so I will decrease it even further. Let's see how far I have to go. This is pretty good, but now I think that the aperture is a little bit too low, so or a little bit too high, so let's decrease this to 3. Maybe even to 2. That really depends on the lens that you use, but I think that this looks pretty good. And actually I really like this setting. I will just go to my transform and rise this up a little bit further. So I will set it to maybe 75 so that I'm more right in the middle of this landscape again. And it looks really cool. Now let's set this to 75. Yeah, and I really like this look. So this is really cool, this macro look in the middle of this amazing landscape. Now we can add a bit of a rotation, and we could also do this by just using the transform here, and we could just animate the Y rotation. So let's do that. Let's just give it a quick Y rotation. So let's say keyframe on maybe -3 degrees, and over a period of 2 seconds I will just animate this to +3 degrees, so a slight motion here. And let's quickly create a quick run preview to see what we have got. And you see the preview is finished, and I think that the result is really cool. I really like it, and it looks just amazing. And as I said, it's still a procedural setup, so you can still put in whatever whatever image you want. There's one little issue that I just see when it's in motion, and this is that these cubes are still intersecting, and I actually do not want this. So I will try to get rid of this by changing the particle size, and right now we are on 4. So let me put this down to 0.8. This is actually a little bit better, and I think that now we see these small gaps in between, and this is exactly what I wanted, so that they are not intersecting, that we have a small gap between them. And yeah, so we got rid of this intersection, and now it looks even better and even more realistic. Okay, so this is it with this tutorial. If you have any questions, then please post them in the comments. I hope that you liked this technique and that you will create amazing animations with it. Thank you very much for watching, and I really hope to see you soon. Goodbye.